entrepreneurs, Joe DiChara here with another awesome segment of Bedrock University. And today I have as my guest a good friend, Gina St. George, who some people might consider a brainiac because she has a BS in chemical engineering and an MBA in finance. Her background enables her to teach her clients to be pragmatic and methodical and to accomplish big goals by doing many small things one after another. After leaving the corporate world, she joined two small businesses and discovered that the same work invoked burnout was everywhere in the world of small businesses too. What a surprise. Process is what you'll come to know, and that processes and systems are two different things. If you want to grow a business without burning out, get ready for some great information, and you'll learn how to get your message or product out to the world, help others change their lives, and do it while you're having a life. Now stand to your feet and welcome Gina St. George. Hi, Gina. How are you?
I'm really glad to be here with you this morning, Joe.
One point that stands out to me here is you talk about burnout. Mm-hmm. And I'm hearing a lot of stuff about burnout now, and there's actually coaches that deal with burnout. Yeah. And it's interesting to find out that it's the same in the small business world that I'm in as the big business world. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. When I left, I spent 17 years in the chemical industry. So I did a lot of really cool stuff. I learned a lot. It shaped who I became as a business person because I learned a lot about business process. I did mergers and acquisitions work. So I learned how to evaluate a business, what makes a business well run, and then I myself was an operations director. So I had P&L responsibilities. And so I got all of that training before I became a small business person, but I traveled a lot and it was just really a big sacrifice on my personal life. One of the things I talk about when I speak, I tell the joke that I say, hey, how many of you think it would be really cool to travel on a private jet? And most people will raise their hand and I'll say, well, I'm not going to lie to you. It actually is pretty cool. But I paid a really high price for that because I was on the go constantly. And I found myself getting divorced. And because I had sacrificed my entire personal life for all of these goals that I had. And, that was my wake up call that, wow, all of this stuff that I'm doing actually doesn't have as much meaning as I thought it would. And so I made the decision that I was going to do something different. And so I began evenings and weekends. I had finished my MBA at that point. So I suddenly had this free time. And so on evenings and weekends, I wrote my first book. And it was a book on bad leadership. It was a satirical book. I used a pseudonym when I wrote it because I still had a job. The pseudonym I used was my three cats, Christine, Casey, Cooper, because Casey and Cooper are our surnames. And so I hyphenated it like a woman would hyphenate her name. And Christine's a first name. So Christine, Casey, Cooper was actually like a perfect pseudonym. And I entertained myself by doing that they were my cats' names. So that was what I did. And then I finally at a seminar met the person who would eventually become my business partner, who was also my partner in life. And randomly we sat next to each other at, the world of entrepreneur training, seminars and events and whatever, and you're trying to learn things and trying to figure out what your path is going to be. I happened to sit next to him. So my path was, it was not just that I was learning things. It was also that I met this person. He was already in business. He'd been in business since 1995. And he had built a successful business with his brother, who was a CPA by training. And his brother was the operations person. And Andy, my partner, was the sales and marketing guy and the face of the company. And so Andy's very charismatic. Everybody loves Andy. You know Andy. He's a hugger. Everyone loves Andy. And his brother was the inside guy doing the nuts and bolts work. Well, tragically, his brother died in 2002, leaving Andy to run the business all by himself, and to figure out how to run the operations. And all of that was good. I mean, he learned a lot. He hired a consultant that helped him do some stuff. But then he ended up hiring an operations manager whose entire goal was to figure out what had made him so successful so he could duplicate it and go into business and compete with him. And then, so that ended up not working. And then it left him with no operations manager. And so here he was back, not having that covered. So when he met me, he's like, I need someone with your skills. And if what you want,
match made in heaven.
It was. So here we are. We were in love, and at the same time, and I lived in Colorado and he lived in Florida. So we're having this long distance relationship. We have a personal relationship, and then at the same time he says, I need your skills. And so,
hold on a second. Isn't this like a formula for more burnout?
It is, and this is where I'm going with it. So he said, if that's what you want, why don't you help me in my business for 90 days? You can whip some things into shape for me, and then you can do some of the other things that you want. And so that was what I did when I quit my job. I went and joined him, and I became his partner, and I worked with him. We actually had two businesses, because there was the flagship business that was started in 1995, and a second one opened in 2002. And this was 2009. So I joined him, and there were a lot of things that didn't have systems and processes, because sales and marketing people oftentimes are not very nuts and bolts driven like operations people are.
Hold on one second. So did you quit your job because you wanted to quit your job, or you quit your job to go with Andy?
Oh, well, I quit my job because I wanted to quit my job.
And it was the right time, because
it was the right time. And, simultaneous to that, we've been having this long distance relationship for 18 months. And so the conversation we were having at the time was, it was either time to be together or not be together. And so I really wanted to quit my job. I was really burned out on being a corporate person. I was really tired of how hard I worked to make money for somebody else. I mean, that's very common in people who decide to go into business for themselves. Right. And at the same time, I had this personal relationship, which drove a lot of the decision.
Did you go into
and
the
then
business?
third was it put me in that world.
Did you go into the business as a partner or as an employee?
As a partner. As a
really?
Partner. Yeah.
Right off the bat. So Andy took a big chance with you, but he was already with you. So
well, it was an earn-in. He
was all in.
It was an
so
earn-in.
You. So that's cool. So you're almost like what I call the accidental entrepreneur. You didn't like start your own business. You just wound up there by, it would have happened. It sounds like you were already fed up with the big business world. Mm-hmm. But you went into an established business that still had all kinds of loose ends and holes and gaps that needed to be filled.
Yes. Yes. And well, subsequent to that, I've done consulting. What I like to say is that I was my first client. So the stuff that I did for those two businesses are what I do with clients now. And that's what I teach. So,
and you actually went into business, and we talked about this a little before the actual interview. You wrote a book.
I did.
And when you write a book, unless you're doing it just for the enjoyment, you're in a business. You were a sole proprietor.
I actually incorporated that business
Okay.
as an
You're
LLC. I did. I incorporated that business that was going to be my leadership training business. So my first book was on bad leadership. It was a satirical book on bad leadership, and my
I got to get that book. Can
it's
you
called
get it
The
on
Crass
Amazon?
Captain's Quick Guide to Management Dysfunction by Christine Casey Cooper. And I don't know if I have a copy here handy. Otherwise,
Okay.
I'd
Well,
show it.
we'll find it, but I want to get to the meat and potatoes of the reason why I asked to interview you. I know you have interesting background and you do coaching and stuff, and you know I might actually hire you because you have some systems and stuff that I need in my business. But you wound up in a situation that I find many small business owners wind up in through no error of your own.
Mm-hmm.
You wound up owing the IRS money. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So so we had two different S corps because we had two businesses, and then we had three LLCs because each business had a building. And so those were incorporated separately as their own LLC. So the LLC owned the building. And then there was another investment real estate entity. So there were 5 entities. And so we did a lot of transactions across entities, paying rent to one, from one entity to another.
Right, so
And
you
then,
actually,
yeah.
you and Andy have a sophisticated business structure that most people don't have. Okay, you and Andy, it seems, and Andy's brother was an accountant, you said?
Yeah. He was actually a CPA. So he
You
kind of
had,
knew a few things.
yeah, both these brought a lot to the table, a lot of business knowledge, and yet you still wound up with a problem. And imagine if you went into a business and you had none of that.
Yeah.
That's who is going to be listening to this podcast.
So
So even with
here's what
background,
happened. We had a full charge bookkeeper who had learned all of these. There were a lot of nuances, and every time I had turnover in that seat, because we were big enough to have a full-time bookkeeper / office manager, full charge bookkeeper, but not big enough to have any kind of additional staff. So it was always one person that
right.
it was always one person. Well, so we had an issue with that person. She left, and we were getting ready to go to Fiji for 2 weeks. This was in 2000. This was in 2010, and we attended a Tony Robbins event at his resort in Fiji, and we were going to be gone for 2 weeks because we were attending that, and at the same time, I was using my timeshare at another place in Fiji. So we were going to be gone for 2 weeks, and oh my God, the full charge bookkeeper is gone. And so I was scrambling to try to figure out how to solve the problem. And I found this bookkeeping service. And, so they touted themselves as, bookkeeping and tax and blah, 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 blah. And the guy says, don't worry, we got you covered. And he hired a person who he paid like $11 an hour, but charged us $25 an hour for her. And said, I'm going to oversee, I have people who are in all kinds of different businesses. And what you get for that fee is you get her doing the work and you get my oversight. I didn't ask enough questions, and I didn't interview his past clients. And, we were kind of on a crunch. And so I trusted him. And so he put this person in our business, and she had to do not only the bookkeeping, but she had to file sales tax. And she had to do payroll for 2 different companies. Well, one of our companies was small enough that you could file the payroll tax monthly. The other had the other company, the bigger company, had a payroll burden high enough that the payroll tax needed to be filed bi-weekly, 5 days following the payday. So this.
Yes, so this is, let me just point out here, this is the normal business model. This is what I do. I offer full CPA oversight and have bookkeepers doing all the grunt work.
Mhm.
And that way I can provide my services at a lower fee. So you did the right thing.
Except I hired the wrong guy, and he wasn't a
But how
CPA
did,
like you, and he wasn't providing the oversight. So I later learned that he's doing all kinds of other stuff. Like he
yeah.
was operating a limousine service, and he was doing all kinds of other things. Like he was like a serial entrepreneur. He had his fingers on a lot of pies, and he wasn't really paying attention. Basically, he gave us a bookkeeper and walked away. And
And now she's got massive responsibilities because the sales tax and payroll taxes are something that they call trust fund taxes.
yep, yeah.
Which is,
So
I know what it is. You want to tell people what that is?
why don't you explain it, because you're the CPA?
Okay, so the trust fund taxes is the money that you collect on behalf of the government. If it's sales taxes for the state, if it's payroll taxes for the IRS and the state. So they're trusting you. You have a fiduciary responsibility to pay over those taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, not everybody pays them over, as Gina found out. Now, when you have a trust fund tax, there's a potential 100% penalty. So not
Yes.
only are you liable for the tax, you got to pay double that plus interest plus penalties for not paying it. It's massive. And
Yes.
they'll lien your personal. You don't get shielded by the corporation on this either. So
No,
that's
that's right. They'll come after you personally.
right.
Yeah.
So what happened?
So what happened is, okay, so we had multiple things going on. So we're paying commercial rent to the entities that, so even though they were all us, the commercial entities owned the real estate. So the corporation paid rent to the LLC that owned the building. Sales tax
Right.
needed to be paid on that. In the state of Florida, you pay tax on commercial rent. So we had
Okay.
those. We had sales tax on sales. The second business was all service, so there was actually no sales tax on that. But we had a lot of sales tax on our on the bigger flagship business. But the bigger issue was that the payroll on our smaller company was small enough to file the payroll taxes only monthly, but on the bigger one, it had to be done biweekly. So the IRS requires that if you pay on Friday, that by the following Wednesday, that you have deposited the payroll tax using EFTPS. What is EFTPS? The electronic
It
funds.
goes directly from your bank to the government treasury.
Right. So that was what didn't happen, because she filed both of them monthly. And so and it wasn't that we didn't pay. We paid the payroll tax, but it was paid at the end of the following month instead of within the 5 days following payroll.
Oh, so she wasn't in compliance.
She was not in compliance, and she's just a contractor to a contractor. He's actually paying her on a 1099, and we were paying him, as a service provider. And so there's no liability. It's all entirely on us that we didn't comply with the schedule for paying payroll tax. And
people
so
don't
say for
realize
example,
this. And I'm sorry to interject, but
okay.
this is an important point. People don't realize when you sign up to run a business, you're signing documents, and if you look at the fine print, it's saying on the penalty of perjury. I mean, you're legally bound. You can't, too many people just go through business, la-di-da, like not paying attention. So you got to know, exactly what you're responsible for.
Yes.
So go on.
Yes. Ultimately, the business owner is responsible. And ultimately, I mean, I got the ugly letters from the IRS, and they're like, they're saying this is what you owe, and we're going to put a lien on your business and on your personal property, and they'll find every bit of it. They'll find your house. They'll find every bit of it to collect the money over them.
I want you to take me back to when you first started getting those letters, because first you don't know there's a problem. You get a letter from the IRS. What went through your mind when you opened that?
I didn't understand what was wrong because I said, well, but we paid. I don't understand. And I didn't have access to good advice. Now, I have since changed the service that I use, and the service that I use is competent, where they actually have CPAs and tax attorneys and everything available. So today, if I were to get a letter like that, I would be like, hey, I got this letter. What? And we have actually had problems. We had a problem with sales tax once, and they paid the penalty for us because they said it was our mistake. We pay penalties, and that's the difference. That's the difference between a good service and a bad one. That they actually said, we made the mistake. We're going to pay your penalty for you.
You're civilly liable. You know, if I made a mistake and it happens, I pay my clients penalties, or I try to get them abated. But now, you didn't get hit with the trust fund penalty. You got hit with interest and penalties, I believe, correct?
Yes, but it was almost as much money as what we owed in payroll tax. So here we actually paid the taxes. And so say, for example, that it was like mid-month payroll that, we like, say the Friday was on the 15th. And so then the payroll tax would have been due on the 20th. And instead it was paid the end of the following month, which is
right.
what
So
you do a smaller payroll.
They hit you with a late payment penalty, and then there's interest on that.
Right.
And it takes a while. Sometimes it takes a year or two for that to catch up to you, right?
Yeah. It took a few months. And it had happened several times. So you're talking about, depending on the timing of that payroll cycle, you're talking about it was 6 weeks late, 4 weeks late if it was at the end of the month. And for that tardiness, I like, my hair was on fire for how much they were saying we owed, and we paid. It wasn't
so
like
you
we
had
didn't
to
pay.
You paid the taxes, but your bookkeeper didn't pay them on time.
Right.
You probably didn't even know what the rules were. So you just settled with them. You paid 100% of what they told you to pay.
I didn't feel like I had any recourse, and we didn't have the resources for that. Today, I would handle it differently, but we wrote some big checks because the letters the letters that the IRS sends you, well, first of all, ever since then, anytime I get any kind of notice from the IRS, just seeing the outside of the envelope makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up.
Yeah, that's what I want to bring out, because you're a sophisticated business owner. You got experience. You're smart, and yet you get a letter from the IRS, and you don't know what it is. It's got to be scary.
It is.
So you got to have. And from what you're telling me, you did all the right things. It could have been a lot worse, believe it or not. Statute of limitations is over on this, but what I do, and I get a lot of clients like this that have problems. A lot of people, they come to me because they have a problem. I'm trying to get new clients and teach them before they start their business.
Yeah.
But what I usually do when there's a penalty, and it's because of the accountant or the bookkeeper, you have what they call reasonable cause. And a lot of times you can get the penalties abated. Times have changed. I still can get penalties abated, but I'm just saying this so people know, even if you have a problem, there's always a solution. There's always a solution. And you and Andy are solution people. So, you found out the hard way, like a lot of people do.
It's interesting that you say that, because I do fancy myself sophisticated. I know a few things about how to do things right. I know how to operate a business, but yet having threatening language in a letter from the IRS made me feel completely helpless.
Yes.
Like, oh my God, Everything I've ever done right doesn't matter. I'm going to get clobbered.
Yeah.
And
And the fear might only last a few seconds, but it's powerful. So, I'd like to segue into, because we only have a few more minutes left, and that's a perfect segue into, you know, what kind of advice would you give a business owner, either, two types of business owners, somebody like you that's in business and somebody just starting out a business?
well, um, I 100% agree with you and what you preach about operating using an actual entity, so that you're not just the sole proprietor and filing your taxes on a Schedule C. Everything I've ever done, I've opened an LLC for it. I've had many different entities. Even today, I have multiple entities that I operate because of the way that you need to structure things for both asset protection and for tax. So
Right.
using entities for sure, that if you decide you're going to do something in business, that you should get started legally correctly. And it's not hard to do, because you can file articles of incorporation by yourself with the Secretary of State of your state, whatever state you're in.
Yes. I
And
actually teach a course on that, on how to incorporate yourself and make yourself into an S corp.
yeah, and you don't need a lawyer to do it. You can do it yourself. So I think it's great that you're teaching that to people. The second thing that I would advise is that that you get some counsel from a good financial advisor, a tax expert, somebody like Joe, who can help you set up your financial system and your bookkeeping correctly. I remember doing this years ago when I first started investing in real estate. I took a small bookkeeping for small business course at the community college, and it was a CPA who taught it, and he was a tax preparation person. And the reason he taught the class was he was trying to get business. So kudos to him for using that. And so what I learned was, how to collect your expenses, how to categorize them. With real estate, you have asset classes, because you have, this piece of real estate and this piece of real estate, even if they're in one LLC. So I learned all of that. And from the beginning, I knew how to keep my books. If you don't know how to keep your books, you can start operating. And then when it's time to do your books, if you don't keep up with them, your books could be completely screwed up. Or even if you are keeping up with your books, if you're not doing it right, there's some subtle things, like what I was just talking about with asset classes with real estate, that each piece of real estate actually has its own P&L, even if it's in the same entity.
Right.
If I didn't know that, I would have kept my books wrong, and I would have had so much rework to do. But I got that advice right out of the gate, and I did it right, so that when it was time to file my taxes, like, all of the information was there and it was all correct already. So the two things I would advise people getting started: one, open a legal entity, and two, get financial advice before you're making money, before you're spending money, before you're operating with money, and learn how to organize your finances so that you don't make a mess. Those would be my two.
That's the advice I would give people. So I appreciate you validating that for me. The entity thing has to be done. And a lot of people think, oh, I should set it up after I start making money. That's a mistake. You should set it up. But the major thing I think you did is you learned the basic bookkeeping system. And I took that for granted when I was 16 and I decided to be a CPA. I took a bookkeeping class in high school. And because of my stupidity and assumptions, I thought everybody did this. So kudos to you for doing that. And, I appreciate your time. And we have a couple of minutes left. The biggest challenge that you see facing a new business owner, any business owner?
Well, from my perspective, I mean, your perspective is financial, but I've mastered that sufficiently, and I have good resources. So our business is big enough that we pay for services, and we don't have problems now because I've hired competent services, and so I have that covered. But um, I think that it is good to know enough on your own, like that you could do it, but that you're not going to do it, so that you can actually have a good conversation. I have good conversations with my CPA because I know what I'm talking about, and it makes for a better
Right.
conversation. So that's a challenge. But the biggest challenge. So you have different layers of challenges. You know, the initial challenge is going to be things like marketing and getting business. But then your higher level challenges, as you progress in business, become operational. They become things like, how do I automate things? What are my systems and processes? How do I manage delegating? How do I train employees? They become higher level problems as you start to grow. And I'm sure that you have seen this in your business. You know, you use contract bookkeepers, and you have to make sure all of them are trained as an extension of you to make sure they're doing things the way you would do them if you were sitting in that seat. So,
I
um,
look at a business as it's like a machine, and you got all
yes.
these moving parts, and if something isn't greased right, or something's out of line, it affects the whole business.
For sure. One of the
So
images that I use is an image of a bunch of gears, and people operating rotating their gears. So if you have one thing that goes wrong, it can stop the entire machine. And
yeah,
so
it holds you back. So
so
now tell me
that's the
about
biggest problem
what.
I see is that people end up overworked because when they start to grow, they haven't systemized and they don't know how to delegate. They don't know they can hire employees, but then the employees don't do things the way they would because they haven't created a process for the employees to
Right,
follow.
and this brings us right back to the burnout,
Yes,
doesn't it?
that
Because
is
you start,
why small
this
business
is
owners burn out
exactly this
because
is exactly what I see business owners doing. They wind up getting burnt out, and they lose sight of their objective. They get off track. So now your business, from what I understand, you started this consulting business where you actually help people implement the systems and processes. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how people would get in touch with you?
yes. You can contact me at GinaSt George.com. That's actually my speaker website. So when I speak, that's how to contact me and get me to speak at events. I also have businessresultssystems.com, and it's plural results,
Okay.
businessresultssystems.com. And there, we do two things there. We offer consulting, but then we also offer just training. So there are courses that you can buy where you learn about how to set up systems to be able to um, hire people and duplicate yourself and not burn out. That was what I spent my time doing when I first joined Andy, is that he touched too many different things. And when you touch everything, your ability to grow is going to be limited by how many things you can touch and how many things that you can do. If you really want to grow, you need to be able to delegate to others so that other people are doing things that and you can do things at a higher level that are strategic. So that's what I teach people how to do. And then the other thing I teach people how to do is for speakers, authors, and coaches, I teach them how to duplicate themselves by creating digital courses, because speakers, authors, and coaches burn out also because their income becomes limited by how much they can do. And so what you do is coach, 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 coach. You're involved. You have to touch everything. And so by duplicating yourself, by making yourself digital, you're able to scale your business, make more money without being present while you're teaching.
And
So that's what I do. That is the Guru Maker System, gurumakersystem.com. And so that's how people can get a hold of me.
okay, so gurusystem.com
Guru Maker
is
System.
your course. I'm sorry?
Guru Maker
Oh,
System.com.
Guru Maker Systems.
Yeah, yep.
Let's get that straight. Google Maker
Guru
Systems.com.
Maker System. Guru, like
Okay.
expert. Guru Maker System.
Guru Maker Systems. It's a tongue twister for me. That is awesome, Gina. I thank you so much for giving us this information. I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people. Do you have any closing words or anything that you want to leave us with?
I'm really happy that you had me here on your show. What you do is really valuable for small businesses, and I would simply reiterate that somebody competent like Joe is a valuable resource to have somebody who actually understands financial structure and tax is a really important person to have on your team, and you can actually get that advice for less than you think, because people think, oh, I can't hire somebody like that because I'm just getting started, it's too expensive. Do it. You need to make sure you're getting that advice. So I would leave your listeners with a testimonial for the type of service that you provide and how valuable it is, because getting yourself in trouble financially and getting yourself in trouble with the IRS is just not a problem that you need in business. It's hard enough to be in business without having the IRS involved. So that would be my parting words of wisdom.
One last short question. How is life for you and Andy?
It's good. It's good. We're very busy. We sold one of our businesses back in 2015. So we still operate one. And so we continue operating that. And selling one business enabled me to do a lot more coaching and consulting. I focus more on that. Andy kind of holds down the fort on the business, and because that wasn't really what I wanted to do full time. So he's back to doing that. I'm doing the coaching and consulting. It's good. I could actually do an entire show on working with your spouse, a subject unto itself. So it was actually better for us to like separate and like, I'm going to do this and you're going to do that. And then we can talk to each other about how we spend our day, because working together all day long, every day is really challenging. But that's for a different show that we'll talk about working with your spouse.
Awesome. I hope I'm going to see you next week at the boot camp. Craig
I will be there.
The last Rockstar Marketing Boot Camp. So I'm looking forward to seeing you and Andy. And I'm over and out. Thank you, Gina.
All right. Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.